Welcome to Blake Street Banter, where one of us knows what the word banter means. The other two are just along for the ride. Tyler, say what's up.
Hey, hey.
And we are joined by, we're going to call you an Atlanta Braves minor league guru, just because I don't have a better title for you. But Atlanta Braves minor league guy, Garrett Spain here. He's going to here talk to the Rocks about the new Rockies prospects that we received and all that. But first, Garrett, how you doing?
Hey, I'm doing all right. Glad you guys gave me a call and wanted to get me on.
Yeah, pretty excited about this. I got to ask you, what's it feel like to be a fan of a winner?
uh, Braves went through a few dark years there, and I was around through it all, so it's nice to see it paying off.
Yeah. And did they have a plan when they were doing that?
Oh yeah, they had a plan and then switched GMs halfway through, and that's probably the best thing that ever happened to the team because it was a pretty deep rebuild there for a while.
Yeah, yeah. It kind of feels like the Rockies are doing that now. The Rockies have a plan. We've added, I don't know, it seems like 50 new arms with these three from Atlanta. Like you said when we were off air, like we're the only trade partner for the Atlanta Braves this year. So it's kind of exciting for you and us to have this conversation. Um, but I do have two quick Braves questions, and we'll get into it. I have two buddies, big Braves fans, and so I asked them a question like, "What could I ask you?" One of them was ask who's going to make an impact on the 2024 roster. So, like, who's a Atlanta Brave prospect right now that's going to make a huge impact next year?
It's kind of a tough. They've kind of emptied out the farm system at this point. I mean, they've had AJ Smith-Shawver up this year, which is their top prospect. That's probably the best bet. I mean, he should be in the major leagues next year, but you've already seen him at the major league level. I would say of the guys that haven't debuted, it's probably going to be a relief pitcher. Um, they've got a guy, Darius Vines at AAA, who's a pitcher, who's a starting pitcher who could come up even this year. He's on the 40-man roster. But I think of the relievers, Hayden Harris, he's a guy not a lot of people have heard of. He was an undrafted free agent last year, but he's got a really good fastball. He's a left-handed relief arm that I think could come up and make an impact next year. Otherwise, it's most of the better prospects are down towards the lower end of the system.
Yeah. I mean, the Braves don't really need him right now. That's why you're giving up these guys for Brad Hand and Pierce Johnson. So that makes sense. Schuster Smith pitched against the Rockies, I think, for his debut, right? Am I making that up?
I'm not 100. His debut was in Arizona, but that was a relief debut. His starting debut, I can't remember who he pitched against.
Because I know the Rockies have faced a lot of debuts in May, June. I feel like Schuster was one.
Well, they've had Jared Schuster up this year, and then they've had AJ Smith-Shawver pitched against Colorado on the 15th of June.
Shawver.
So it was his third game.
Okay.
Second start, yeah.
Okay, there we go. All right, so I wasn't completely off. All right. And then how about which pitcher you're most excited about coming up? You just kind of talked about it there. Is anybody else you want to add to that list?
Honestly, I mean, it's pretty rough. I mean, I would say Darius Vines at the guys that haven't been at the major league level, that's probably the best pitching prospect they got right now. Everybody else is really pretty low in the system. I guess a guy that's kind of could be there next year, Spencer Schwellenbach. He had Tommy John surgery, so he hasn't pitched since 2021, but he's had a really good season this year. His numbers are okay. His stuff is a lot better than that. He's up at high A now. He is injured right now, so we'll kind of see. But he's a guy he's an older player. I think he's 23, 24 now. So they could move him through the system pretty quick, and he could be another guy. They kind of see him as a similar player to Spencer Strider, not that good, but in terms of a primarily two-pitch pitcher who is, up to 99, throws a good vertical slider, and so they see him as a similar profile to that.
Okay, yeah, that'd be nice.
So one more Braves question before we kind of dive into this, and it'll come up especially with Victor Vodnik and Tanner Gordon. How do the Rays operate for us who are not looking from the inside, just fans of another team? You see a lot of shuffling in the minor leagues, a lot of promotions, and even some demotions. So kind of, could you give us a little more insight on the frequency of that and how that's working out?
I think the Braves specifically are aggressive with their players. I think if you see a player that they feel has done well, even if they're not necessarily putting up the numbers, they're willing to move guys. And, they're specifically in a situation where they're trying to keep their competitive window open. So there's not really a benefit to them keeping a guy down in the system 3 to 4 years if he can help the team now. They want to put out the best, 40-man roster, best 26-man roster that they can. And so they're going to move guys up if they're ready. And that's why you've seen a lot of guys like Michael Harris, Spencer Strider, who teams didn't really expect to come up that quickly, and they were already contributing at the major league level.
God, that'd be so nice. Like just like leaning into it and just like enjoying all that with it, because the Rockies should have done that at the beginning of this year, but instead we signed Profar and Hidden Herald and a few other pieces. But we're not doing that. We're talking prospects. We traded you Pierce Johnson for Victor Vodnik and Tanner Gordon. So let's get into Tanner Gordon first. Big guy, 6'5" right-hander. Stuff has been okay. Like the numbers kind of sit okay. He was number 22 on the Atlanta Braves top 30 list at the end of last year, and he slots in at the number. He's not even on the top 30 for the Rockies this year. Just real quick introduction for Rockies fans about Tanner Gordon.
Gordon is not a guy I've ever been very high on. He does have a good fastball. He's mostly in the low 90s, but he can run it up to 95. I think there was an idea when he was drafted that there was projectability there because of his size, because he's 6'5". He hasn't really ever projected well. The fastball is good. He locates it well, especially up in the zone. So he gets swings and misses on his fastball. I think the issue with him is that his secondaries have never developed. And so it's going to be hard for he went up to AAA this year, really struggled because he doesn't really have anything other than a fastball. So I think there's arm talent there. A team that can develop that arm talent and maybe add a good slider would be able to benefit from him. And I think that he could, with his fastball, turn into a relief arm. But it's just hard. I think he's 25 already. He is Rule 5 eligible this winter, though I don't think he's going to get selected. I don't see him getting selected in the Rule 5 draft. But he's a guy that has some relief potential, but I've just never seen enough in the secondary pitches to really feel confident in him.
Well, so I think being with the Rockies, you don't think about pitching development as a strength, but I think we've seen in recent years the kind of developing more of the vertical slider. They can more induce ground balls than miss bats. So it seems like this could be a decent fit for him if they can kind of push that along. And so you're not so high on him actually projecting a little bit more to maybe sit mid 90s. You don't necessarily see that in the cards.
I haven't seen him in a relief role, so I don't know what he would do in shorter stints. I know that as a starter, he's primarily 92, 93, but I've seen him up to 95 before. I think he's maybe touched 96 before, but the highest I've seen him is 95. I've heard very good reports and there were good opinions on his fastball really coming up to the system. A lot of guys liked him. It's just, I don't think that secondary stuff has worked for him, but I still think he could add some velocity, but it's, once you get up to 24, 25, those guys usually don't add velocity at that point.
Yeah, he's probably going to stick right around there. Changeup and slider are those secondary pitches, like you were saying, that he's got right now. Throws a lot of strikes, though, and it kind of seems like the Rockies are picking guys that throw a lot of strikes. Like we'll talk about Alec Barger in a little bit. He seems like a big strike thrower. So kind of just needs to develop those secondary pitches. Starting pitcher, probably back end reliever going forward for Tanner Gordon. Yeah, I don't know. I was trying to come up with a question with that recap there, but
he's a guy that there's definitely talent there. It's just I haven't seen, personally, he's just not one that I've ever been high on.
Yeah, and that's fair. He had one start for the Hartford Yard Goats already. Went 5.2 innings, 6 strikeouts, 5 hits, 2 walks, 2 runs. Actually, 0 walks. Nope. 2 walks. That was right. So a pretty decent start last week for the Hartford Yard Goats in his debut there. So we'll have to see how those secondary pitches go forward for him, trying to get that AAA, because once he gets to that AAA, that PCL is going to eat that fastball up. It's going to be hard to work around that, which is going to make Rockies fans a little bit more hesitant about Tanner Gordon. All right, so that's what we're watching with Tanner Gordon. Victor Vodnik. Now, a lot of people are big on Victor Vodnik. Billy Schmidt is on record. He's the GM for the Rockies, that he's just saying Victor Vodnik's name wherever he can go. If he's talking to any of the media guys, Victor Vodnik's name is coming up. Give us a quick intro to Victor real quick.
Vodnik at one point was actually what I considered to be the top pitching prospect in the Braves system. He was 21. He was at AA. He was doing well. The issue Vodnik has had is injuries. He had a shoulder injury at one point. He had a back issue. He's had some lower body stuff. As far as I know, he's never had an elbow issue, so that's good. He hasn't had a red flag there, but he's stagnated because he hasn't been on the field. But in terms of pure talent, I mean, he's always been extremely good. He was throwing 100 miles per hour back in 2019. We knew that about him. He was a guy that's always been throwing hard. The slider and changeup, right now the changeup's ahead of the slider. It tends to kind of, over the years, they've kind of gone back and forth where sometimes the slider looks good, sometimes the changeup does. So there's inconsistency there, but in terms of, I think he's a major league reliever, and I think he can be a very good major league reliever. He just needs to stay healthy, and he needs to develop his command further, but I don't know why he was in Double-A with the Braves. I think he was ready for Triple-A. I think he was a guy that could contribute in the future, but I know he's also a guy that they left unprotected from the Rule 5 draft this past year. He's going to be Rule 5 eligible again this winter, and I would assume the Rockies will probably protect him in the Rule 5 draft. I think he's a player that is worth protecting, at least, especially in their situation, but he's a guy that the Braves were willing to move him because there's a lot of risk involved, and the Braves don't want to take on that risk versus having a guy like Johnson who can come in and contribute to the team immediately. Right. But in terms of as a prospect, Vodnik is very, very good as a relief prospect. He's probably the best or second best relief prospect they've had in the last 10 years since Craig Kimbrell came through. And he's got late inning relief potential. I don't think the Braves, because of the injuries, he's undersized. I assume the Rockies are not going to move him back into a starting rotation. He moved out of the starting rotation with the Braves last year. I know his first 2 outings with Hartford were out of the bullpen, so I assume he'll be a relief arm going forward. But in terms of his potential, I mean, his ceiling is through the roof. I think he could be a closer at the major league level.
And so do you think there's some kind of questions with his mechanics? He seems like he has a little bit of violence in his delivery, and sometimes that translates to those injuries and to a lack of command. So do you think that is kind of a knock on his profile as well?
Oh yeah, I mean that's always been his issue. He's undersized. He's not a premium athlete. He has complicated mechanics, so that's been an issue with him. But I have seen him at times. I saw it with him in Low-A before he suffered all those injuries. I've seen him command his fastball, and I've seen him have 2 good off-speed pitches. So the potential is there. I just think it's about consistently getting reps and staying on the field, and I think that they will come. I don't think that he's going to ever be an even average command arm, but if he's a 40, 45 grade command arm with his pure stuff, I think he can stick in a relief role and be very good.
Yeah, that changeup is insane. I saw a few videos of it, and it looks fun. It's just nasty. Yeah. And the Rockies seem to like this fastball changeup, fastball slider type pitcher. So him sliding in already as the Hartford Yard Goats kind of end game guy, because they've seen some guys move up. It's promising for Vodnik, and that stuff, if you can come in and get 3 outs real quick, like that's going to play. And the Rockies seem to be doing really well with this bullpen arm development. Like they have some dogs ready to go at the major league level, and so sliding in Vodnik into that is going to be fun. Right now, he's number 22 on the Rocks top 30, was number 7 on the Atlanta's top 30 at the end of last year. So the pedigree's there. It's going to be fun to watch him. All right, and then let's end it. Brad Hand for Alec Barger. Now, this was a head scratcher. Just didn't see a lot about Alec Barger. We kind of talked about it, big strike thrower. But what do you have for Barger for us?
Barger was a guy that the Braves organization themselves liked quite a lot a few years ago when he was drafted. He's since moved out of the rotation, which has kind of killed his stock, and I don't think his command has quite developed where they wanted to. But I know that they've been messing around with his pitches. He used to throw a cutter. He used to throw a changeup more often. But now that he's moved into a relief role, he's primarily fastball slider. His fastball's up to 97. It's a good fastball. Kind of average-ish characteristics, but it's effective, and he gets a lot of outs. The slider is kind of where he can run into issues. It's very good when it's on. It can be very bad when it's off, and he needs to work on really commanding it consistently. But as a 2-pitch mix, it's very good. He's a very good athlete, and that's a lot of what the Braves target is athletes. And so he's a very good athlete. He was a 2-way player in college before he moved over to NC State. He started out in Northern Illinois, played some outfield there. So great athlete, great arm talent. I like the fastball. I like the slider in terms of the pure characteristics of it. Once you get some consistency there, I think it's a major league quality arm. It's a guy that can get there, but he's just going to have to develop some of that command. And I think that's when you have a guy that has that level of athleticism, you have more confidence that command is going to come with time.
Were you a little surprised seeing that trade get announced and seeing him as the guy it took to get Brad Hand? We saw a pretty inflated sellers market, and seeing that for us, it was like, okay, that seems a little light. Do you have the same sentiment?
My initial reaction was I have no idea how Alec Barger turned into a major league arm in a trade situation. I think for that it's probably more a matter of they dumped, they have the $500,000 buyout on hand this offseason and probably somewhere in the range of about $500,000 left on his contract this year. So it's probably a lot of it was more dumping that $1 million than it was getting Barger. I think that was the bigger part of the trade for the Rockies, but I do think Barger has potential, and like I was talking about with Vodnik, they're trading in risk for a guy that the Rockies weren't gonna bring back Hand next year anyway. So they got something, and they dumped a little bit of salary. I think that the salary dump was probably more of it. Barger's fine. I would have Barger above Gordon personally, but I don't think that he's necessary. I mean, he's definitely not in any way a top tier prospect. It's there's some ability there. There's some middle relief ability, but there's not a lot of outcomes where he's really an impact guy. But I think it seemed light to me. I was definitely surprised by it.
Yeah, that salary dump is a valid point. Like, why? Yeah, get something, and that's kind of what the Rockies' MO has kind of been: just get as many arms, get something for this. Were you disappointed it wasn't Brett Suter?
I wasn't expecting the Braves to really get anybody all that good. They don't do a ton around the deadline. It's just Alex Anthopoulos doesn't like to spend around the deadline because it typically ends up costing more than the players are worth. And so I really wasn't expecting them. This is kind of how I expected it to go. I thought they might add a starter, but this was really, I figured they'd get kind of a, mid-tier relief arm, and that'd be probably about it.
Yeah, and you guys got two with Hand and Johnson there. So liking the Atlanta Braves playoff chances with our leftovers.
Oh, I mean, they're going to the playoffs. We'll kind of see. They got to get their rotation healthy to see how they'll do in the playoffs. But they've been a very good team, so I think they've done a really good job of building. Especially Alex Anthopoulos has done a great job.
Yeah, looking at that roster and it just set for the next 2 or 3 years, I'm just like, oh, must be so nice just to have this problem. Like, and I love the fact, like you said earlier, they rush the guys up. And if they can contribute, they can contribute. If not, you'll sit back down. We'll just ask the next guy to come up, and that's just kind of the mentality of the organization. It seems like, and that's just fun. I love that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So, all right. So, if you were ranking these three players, Vodnik, Gordon, Barger, for the rest of their careers in Colorado, which is tough to pitch in,
yes.
How would you kind of rank them going forward? As like major league contributors?
It's Vodnik at 1, a huge gap to Barger at 2, and then Gordon. I think Gordon and Barger are kind of in the same tier of player, but Vodnik is clearly the best player that they've gotten. I mean, we've all liked Vodnik a lot, and he's a guy that I honestly thought would contribute in Atlanta this year. So I think that he could be a pretty quick contributor to that bullpen.
All right. I love that. Any other questions you got for him, Tyler?
No, I think you nailed it for us. So thank you very much, Garrett.
Yeah.
Yeah. Appreciate you coming in, the short notice, and being able to come on and making it happen. I just appreciate that. And I know I learned a little bit something more about these guys, and I guess I'm big on Vodnik also. So let's dive in on the double V.
Yeah, absolutely. Vodnik, I appreciate you guys having me on, and I think you're going to enjoy Vodnik for sure.
Yeah. And hopeful for the arms we sent. I think Pierce Johnson, there's a little bit more to unlock there. So
yeah, Johnson's I believe, been pretty good with the Braves. Hand, they've got enough lefty relievers. He'll get some middle relief innings, and he's fine. Right? I mean, there's nothing wrong with a guy that fills innings, does pretty well. I think he'll fit in well.
Yeah, and it's fun for us. You get to root for someone that's going to go to the playoffs, so we'll be able to put a little support behind you guys. And yeah, it looks like you guys have a tank of a roster. So good luck going forward.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thank you. And as always, go Rocks, minor league affiliates. Woo!